In the Bible, there are stories of giants who walked the earth, colossal beings who challenged entire armies and kingdoms. But who were they? Arba, the supreme ancestor of the giants, the enigmatic 5 races of giants that existed in ancient times. The revenge of Goliath's brother, who swore retaliation against Israel, and an almost forgotten epic conflict, 10,000 giants facing just 4 kings. Are they just legends? Or are there more hidden truths in these stories? Why were these creatures so feared? And what was their final fate? Get ready to dive into a journey through the past, revealing the mysteries of the biblical giants and the titanic battles that marked history. What you are about to discover will challenge everything you knew about these legendary beings. The giants of the Bible, Arba, Goliath, and the War of 10,000. The biblical giants make their first appearance early in the book of Genesis, in chapter 6, where one of the most intriguing accounts of the scriptures is revealed. The text states that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took them as wives, creating a hybrid lineage of beings known as the nephilim. These colossal creatures, described as giants, inhabited the earth before the flood and surprisingly reappeared after it. But who were these sons of God mentioned in the holy text? The answer lies in the very root of the Hebrew term used Ben ha-Elohim, which in Aramaic is bin Elaha. Both expressions are traditionally associated with angels and celestial beings, making it clear that the giants were in fact the result of the union between humans and fallen angels, those who abandoned their heavenly home and became corrupt. In other words, the giants were descendants of the ancient demons. The book of Genesis makes it clear that before the flood, these beings proliferated and spread terror across the earth, corrupting humanity and contributing to the chaotic state that led God to send the great judgment of the waters. However, the text also mentions that after that time, meaning after the flood, they mysteriously reappeared on earth. But how was this possible? Many scholars and theologians believe that the fallen angels continued to interact with humanity, infiltrating ancient civilizations and creating a new Nephilim descent. There are reports of these demonic beings engaging with priestesses of pagan cults, who in turn worshipped ancient deities. The Bible often warns that these pagan gods were not mere human inventions, but demons in disguise seeking worship and power. Evidence of this can be seen in historical and biblical records themselves, such as the Egyptian sorcerers who performed supernatural feats before Moses and Aaron. These magicians were able to turn their staffs into serpents, something beyond mere illusion tricks, a clear indication that a dark force was operating behind them. Therefore, the giants were not just large physical beings. They were a vestige of the celestial rebellion, a living mark of the corruption brought by fallen angels, and continued to play an enigmatic role in human history long after the flood. After the flood, a new generation of giants reappeared on earth, spreading across various regions of the Middle East and beyond. The Bible mentions these colossal creatures as warrior tribes, many of them established in strategic territories, challenging entire civilizations and becoming one of the greatest obstacles for the people of Israel. The sacred texts suggest that at least 5 races of giants inhabited the region, ranging from the Levant to Mesopotamia and even reaching ancient Egypt. Their descendants spread across lands that today correspond to Israel, Iraq, Syria, and other neighboring countries, establishing strongholds and imposing cities. One of the most striking accounts of these beings can be found in the book of Numbers, chapter 13. When the Israelites were sent to spy on the land of Canaan, they were terrified upon seeing the descendants of Anak, one of the most feared tribes of giants. They described the Anakim as enormous and frightening creatures, so colossal that in comparison the Hebrews felt like grasshoppers. Furthermore, The accounts highlight the strength and numbers of the Canaanites, whose cities were impressively fortified and defended by these supernatural beings. But who were these 5 races of giants? What was their origin and the meaning of their names given by the peoples of the time? In the next segment, we will delve into the identity of these colossal tribes and the mysteries surrounding their existence in the ancient world. The first and main race of giants was the race of the Rephaim, or Rephites. Since time immemorial, stories of giants have pervaded humanity's ancient records. Among these colossal creatures, one race stands out as the most feared and enigmatic, the Rephaim, or Rephaites. This name mentioned in ancient scriptures carries deep and disturbing meanings. In the singular, they were called Rapha, but their collective designation evokes something beyond mere physical might. The word Rephaim, both in ancient Hebrew and Phoenician, carries a somber weight. It is not just about gigantic beings, but entities that for ancient peoples were somehow linked to the realm of the dead. The very meaning of the term alludes to something ghostly, to specters wandering among the living, to the undead. But why did the ancients view them this way? The answer dates back to an event that altered the course of humanity. The flood. According to ancestral traditions, the giants were exterminated by the Great Deluge, extinct, eradicated, wiped from existence. And yet, centuries later, they returned. What could explain this resurgence? The explanation, according to ancient accounts, lies in the interference of the fallen angels. These entities, worshipped as deities by some civilizations, once again mingled with human women, giving rise to a new lineage of giants, the continuation of the ancient stock that was believed to have been destroyed. The stature of the Rephaim was something that defied understanding. They were titans among men, reaching impressive heights. Biblical records mention that one of them, Og, king of Bashan, was approximately 15 feet 5 inches tall and nearly 6.5 feet wide. This description was not exclusive to him. It indicated that the other Rephaites had similar proportions, making them true mountains of flesh and bone, beings that walked the earth like gods of war and terror. The second race of giants that walked the lands of Canaan and terrified many has been well known thanks to novels and Hollywood films. The Anakim. If there was a race of giants that struck fear and dread in the lands of Canaan, it was the Anakim, the feared sons of Anak. Unlike the Rephaim, whose name evoked the world of the dead, the Anakim carried in their very name a troubling revelation about their origin. The term Anak was not just a name, it was a clue about the lineage of these colossal beings derived from ancient Sumerian. Anak or Anakim meant something that completely changed the perspective on these giants, children of those who fell from the sky. This definition alone is enough to cast a shadow over the true nature of the Anakim. They were not seen only as enormous and powerful beings, but as direct descendants of the entities that came from the sky. The ancient pagan gods worshipped in regions of the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Their parents, their progenitors, were not mere mortals, but those who, according to ancestral traditions, fell from the heavens and gave rise to a race that defied the natural order. Whenever the Anakim were mentioned in ancient records, the emphasis was placed on their immense stature and colossal strength. The scriptures describe them as formidable warriors, so tall that they surpassed ordinary men by more than 6 or 10 feet. Estimates suggest their height ranged from 11.5 to 14.5 feet, with some accounts even suggesting they could rival the Rephaim, surpassing the 15 feet mark. If the Anakim were feared for their strength and celestial lineage, and the Rephaim for their spectral aura, there was still a third race of giants that ravaged the lands of the Middle East and spread terror throughout the Levant, the fearsome Emim. The mention of these colossal beings can be found in the sacred scriptures, specifically in the book of Deuteronomy. 2:10-11, where it is written the Emim formerly lived there, a people great and numerous, and as tall as the Anakim. Here there is a crucial detail. The sacred text itself emphasizes that the Emim were as tall as the Anakim, suggesting that these titans also surpassed 13 feet in height, possibly even rivaling the Rephaim themselves. The idea that these giants were a terrifying threat resonates even in the meaning of their name. The term Emim, according to Rabbi Rashi, can be translated as fearsome or monstrous. This name, far from being just a tribal designation, was a direct reflection of their frightening appearance and their psychological impact on the peoples of the time. The Emim were not just giants in stature, they inspired true terror. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of this race was not just their size. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, one of the primary historical sources on ancient giants, described a disturbing detail. The Emim had a terrifying scream comparable to the roar of a lion, a fierce, guttural and resonant sound that, according to reports, froze even the bravest warriors with fear. Furthermore, their grotesque appearance set them even further apart from the other giants. While the Anakim were strong and the Rephaim seemed like specters from another world, the Emim were described as true monsters, their features distorted by the brutality and horror they inspired. Whether through their strength, their colossal height, or their terrifying presence, the Emim left their mark on the memory of ancient peoples. The fourth race of giants that ravaged the Middle East, the Zuzim. Among the hidden enigmas of antiquity, a race of giants stands out in the vast landscape of the Middle East. Known as the Zuzim, these colossal beings are mentioned in ancient records and described as creatures of extraordinary strength. Their name, derived from an Aramaic term, carries an intriguing meaning: rigid, strong, or robust, a designation that reflects not only their impressive stature, but also their superhuman resilience. Reports suggest that the Zuzim stood between 10 and 13 feet tall, making them true titans who walked the earth. They were imposing, endowed with brute strength that made them feared in battles and territorial disputes. Like the Nephilim, Rephaim, and Anakim, they were part of the mysterious giant lineages that marked ancient history, leaving traces that continue to intrigue scholars and researchers of the occult to this day. But what happened to the Zuzim? In the book of Genesis 14, we find an enigmatic mention of these beings. The account describes how Chedorlaomer, king of the Elamites, led a devastating military campaign against various tribes and nations. And among his victims were the Zuzim. According to the sacred texts, this monarch led an unrelenting attack which resulted in the massacre of many of these giants, weakening their presence in the ancient world. The extermination of the Zuzim was just one of many episodes in the war between humans and giants described in the scriptures and oral traditions. The last race of giants in the Old Testament, the Zamzummim. Among the shadows of the past, in the ancient times when Colossal walked the earth, one last race of giants stands out in the records of the Old Testament. Little mentioned and shrouded in mystery, they were known as the Zamzummim, a tribe of gigantic beings who inhabited the lands of the Middle East, more specifically east of the Jordan River. The Zamzummim shared many similarities with the Zuzim, another race of giants from the same region. They were tall, imposing, and possessed immense strength. Ancient records indicate that their height ranged from 13 to 14.5 feet, which made them true titans in the face of common men. They were a prominent presence in biblical geography, described as a race of fierce warriors who occupied strategic territories and instilled fear in the neighboring tribes. However, even these giants were unable to resist the relentless tide of history. The Zamzummim came into direct conflict with the descendants of Lot, especially the Ammonites, who were disputing the fertile lands once belonging to this ancient race. The sacred texts report that the Ammonites destroyed the Zamzummim and took their lands for themselves, assimilating their conquests and gradually erasing the traces of this colossal race. Many scholars believe that the Zamzummim were a subdivision of the Rephaim, another group of giants mentioned in the scriptures. If this theory is correct, it means that this lineage inhabited not only Jordan but also regions of Syria and the present-day territory of Israel. This suggests that in the distant past, vast areas of the Middle East were dominated by these giants, whose descendants may have been hunted to extinction by the smaller peoples who later emerged. The Great Battle, a colossal event lost in the shadows of time, a monumental war fought in the days of Abraham, where mighty kings clashed in a confrontation that would echo through eternity. But there is something many are unaware of. This was not just a war between men. There was something more, something gigantic. The book of Genesis, in its 14th chapter, tells a fascinating account of this ancient war, describing the battle between 4 kings and 5. However, hidden in the lines of this biblical narrative, there is a surprising truth. This war also involved a legion of 10,000 giants. Who were these kings? What civilizations were behind this conflict? And most intriguingly, who were these giants? Where did they come from? And what happened to them after this battle? Now, I invite you to dive into this enigmatic reading of Genesis 14, where the details of this war are revealed. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, with Shinab, king of Admah, and with Shember, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer, and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in Shaveh, Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to En-Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar. 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there. And they that remained fled to the mountain, and they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner. And these were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. As you can see, the events narrated are of an impressive magnitude, but there is still much more to be revealed. Now, let's explore the identity of each of these kings, their kingdoms, and the role they played in this battle. And most importantly, let's understand the true secret behind the three races of giants who participated in this epic confrontation. The first king mentioned in this enigmatic account is Amraphel. But who was he really? What was his true role in this hidden war of antiquity? In ancient texts, his name appears in different forms. Amraphel in Hebrew, Anraphel in Greek, and Amraphel in Latin. But his origin goes far beyond the words. It is rooted in a legendary land shrouded in mystery. Shinar, a name that resonates through the millennia, is an ancient designation for Sumer, the primordial land of great kings and the first known civilizations. This region, also identified as Babylon, was a center of power and knowledge, where, according to some traditions, the first human empires flourished under the guidance of ancient gods. In the verses of Genesis 14, Amraphel appears as one of the four kings who marched to war alongside Tidal, king of nations, Arioch, king of Elasar, and Chedorlaomer, king of Elam. Together, they devastated Sodom and the neighboring cities in the bloody conflict of the Valley of Siddim. But there is an even more surprising detail. They faced colossal creatures, beings that conventional history insists on erasing from humanity's memory. But who was Amraphel really? Some scholars believe that this name conceals an ancient Sumerian title. Some suggest that he was Kunti-Rapaltu, a Sumerian monarch whose name can be translated as the Great Person. This connection is based on the Sumerian linguistic structure, where the word Kunti would correspond to the prefix of the name Anraphel in Hebrew, while Rapaltu would have evolved into Rapastu. If this theory is correct, then Amraphel was not just an ordinary king. He may have been one of the last rulers to maintain contact with the forbidden secrets of antediluvian civilizations and more. His alliance in this war may have been motivated not just by political reasons, but by hidden knowledge dating back to the times of the giants and the Nephilim. Among the great leaders of antiquity, one name stands out from the shadows of history. Chedorlaomer, the enigmatic king of Elam. His dominion extended over the land of the Elamites, one of the oldest Semitic peoples, direct descendants of Shem. The region he ruled corresponds to what we now know as Iran, but his influence stretched far beyond geographical borders. In ancient Elamite records, he is mentioned as Kudur-Lagamar, a title suggesting a power and presence that echoed through the corridors of time. But Chedorlaomer did not rule alone. Among the kings forming his alliance, we find Arioch, the sovereign of Elasar. The exact location of his kingdom remains shrouded in mystery. Some historians suggest that Elasar could have been located in Asia Minor, perhaps in Cappadocia or Antioch, lands known for their ancient fortresses and for having been the stage of empires that rose and fell over the centuries. Other theories point to an even more obscure kingdom, lost in the mists of time, where rulers like Arioch played crucial roles in the events that shaped entire civilizations. What do these figures have in common? These are names that emerge from the depths of history, but carry with them a weight that transcends simple mention in ancient texts. They were kings, yes, but also key pieces in a much larger game. A game of power, conquests, and secrets buried beneath the ruins of the past. Tidal, the enigmatic king of nations, known as Tidal in the original Hebrew, ruled a land surrounded by mysteries. One intriguing detail about his domain lies in the very word nations, which in Hebrew and Phoenician means nations, while in the Semitic context, it can be translated as peoples. This linguistic peculiarity raises a fascinating hypothesis. Tidal may not have been just a king of a single territory, but a sovereign who ruled a confederation of tribes, an alliance of ethnically distinct peoples united under a single domain. This idea fits with the theory put forward by historian David Rohl, who suggests that Tidal might be identified with Tishtal, a Hurrian ruler who controlled the Zagros Mountains, a strategic region between modern-day Iran and Iraq. If this correlation is true, the enigma of Tidal deepens even further, as it would mean that he was at the helm of a multicultural empire at the crossroads of various ancient civilizations. Putting this theory in a broader perspective, the alliance of kings mentioned in ancient accounts presents a complex tapestry of nations. Amraphel, king of Shinar, associated with the Sumerian domain in the heart of Mesopotamia. Arioch, king of Elisar, possibly linked to the region of Cappadocia in Asia Minor. Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, a Semitic monarch, descendant of the Elamites, in the territory that now corresponds to Iran. Tidal, king of nations, who, in light of the evidence, may have been a Hurrian leader, commanding a coalition of nomadic peoples and warrior tribes. Among the most enigmatic accounts of the Old Testament is an event of epic proportions, a titanic war between 4 kings and a colossal army of 10,000 giants from 3 distinct races. Chapter 14 of the book of Genesis describes a conflict that transcends mere territorial disputes. This is a battle against beings of superhuman strength, descendants of mysterious lineages whose origin is lost in the mists of time. The 3 giant peoples who faced the 4 kings and their armies were the Rephaim, the Zuzim, and the Emim. Each of these races had unique characteristics, but they all shared something in common: their terrifying stature and reputation as invincible warriors. Rephaim, the Colossus of Ashtaroth Karnaim. The first giants mentioned in the narrative are the Rephaim, or Rephaites, an ancient race of imposing beings whose massive bodies could reach up to 5 meters in height. They were described as Colossi, entities whose mere presence instilled terror. In Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Rephaim were the first to confront the armies of the 4 kings. The battle was fierce, as the giants' enormous size and strength made it nearly impossible to bring them down. However, after a brutal clash, the Rephaim were defeated, marking the first step in the king's campaign to conquer the lands inhabited by these titanic beings. The identity of the Rephaim remains shrouded in mystery. Some believe they were descendants of the nephilim, the giants mentioned in Genesis 6, possibly survivors of the Great Flood. Zuzim, the race hidden in the shadows of time. The Zuzim were the second race of giants mentioned in the text. Unlike the Rephaim, the Bible reveals little about their origin or physical characteristics. They appear enigmatically as a monstrous people who inhabited the region of Ham. Their name quickly disappears from the scriptures, as if their presence was a secret that few should know. Led by Chedorlaomer, the 4 kings marched against the Zuzim, and a new massacre ensued. The brutality of the war against these colossal beings echoed through the generations, but few records detail the true extent of their strength. Were they such terrifying warriors that their existence had to be erased from historical records? Or were they the last survivors of a forbidden lineage whose memory was deliberately suppressed? Emim, the monstrous guardians of the lost lands. The third race of giants faced by the 4 armies were the Emim. The very meaning of their name in ancient Hebrew and Aramaic indicated their terrifying nature, the monstrous or the dreadful. Their territory stretched over strategic regions, being mentioned as inhabitants of lands through which the Israelites passed during the Exodus. The Emim were compared to the legendary Anakim, another race of giants mentioned in the Bible. The Moabites considered them equivalent to the Rephaim, suggesting that they belonged to the same lineage of ancient titans. Their tusks, their colossal hands, and their massive bodies instilled fear even in the most well-trained armies. But despite their devastating strength, they too were brought down by the coalition led by Chedorlaomer. The Bible does not provide detailed accounts of this war, but its significance is undeniable. In any case, the war against the 10,000 giants marked one of the most extraordinary moments in the hidden history of humanity. a battle not only for territorial supremacy, but for control of a world where giants walked among men until they were eradicated by the forces that would shape the future of civilizations. The battle was without a doubt monumental. On one side, the colossal Rephaim, Zuzim, and Emim, beings of titanic stature and colossal strength. On the other, the four kings of the earth and their armies determined to eradicate this ancient threat. Despite the giants' physical advantage, who could reach between 4 and 5 meters in height, the human armies prevailed. However, this victory came at a high cost. The overwhelming number of mortal warriors against the 10,000 giants made the difference on the battlefield, but the struggle was brutal and bloody. Records do not clarify how the four kings were able to defeat such a terrifying force. Among the many defining moments in David's life, his rise to the throne may be the most surprising. From humble beginnings, he was just a young shepherd from the tribe of Judah, the son of Jesse, a direct descendant of the royal lineage of Judah. However, against all odds, he was chosen by God to become the king of Israel, replacing Saul, whose reign had been compromised by his disobedience and fall from divine favor. David was not only a shepherd, he was also a talented musician and poet whose compositions would be immortalized in the Psalms. But his destiny went far beyond music. He would become not only a king, but the greatest ruler Israel had ever known, a man after God's own heart. His journey was marked by challenges, wars, and victories that shaped the history of the Israelite nation. Among the many battles he faced, none was as emblematic as his confrontation with Goliath. David, then a young man between 15 and 17 years old, without military training, dared to face a warrior feared by all, a Philistine giant who terrorized the armies of Israel. With a sling and 5 stones, he defeated the fearsome Goliath, proving that faith and courage can overcome any obstacle. But who was Goliath? This giant who spread terror among the Israelites. What made him so feared? His enormous height, superhuman strength, and combat skills made him virtually unbeatable. However, his mystery went beyond his brutality. Goliath belonged to an ancient and enigmatic lineage, the Rephaim, a race of giants mentioned in scriptures and historical accounts. What many don't know is that Goliath was not alone. He was just one of many giants that still existed in those times. Brothers and relatives who shared the same mysterious origin from the days of Moses. And even in the times of Abraham, the Rephaim were known for their imposing presence and impact on the battles fought in the Promised Land. Goliath's defeat by David was not just a personal victory, but a milestone in the conflict between the Israelites and these legendary beings, forever changing the course of history. The origin of the giants has always been an enigma, surrounded by mystery and speculation. However, there is a consensus among scholars of the scriptures. These colossal beings likely emerged after the flood, the result of a forbidden union between fallen angels and human women. These celestial entities, known as the Bene Elohim, descended to earth and took for themselves the daughters of men, creating a hybrid lineage of extraordinary beings, giants who spread terror and domination across the earth. The very term Rephaim carries a dark connotation. In Hebrew and Phoenician, it can be translated as the dead living or ancestral spirits, suggesting that these beings were somehow connected to ancient entities that perished in the flood, but mysteriously reappeared in the post-flood world. Some ancient accounts indicate that these giants were not only brutal warriors, but also possessed advanced knowledge and supernatural abilities, reinforcing the belief that their origin went beyond mere human descent. The Bible makes it clear that Goliath was not an isolated case. He was part of a larger lineage and had brothers who shared the same nefarious origin. After his death at the hands of David, his brothers swore revenge against the young king of Israel. In one of the many battles between the Israelites and the Philistines, one of these giants attempted to exact that revenge, putting David in great danger, an event that nearly cost him his life, if not for the intervention of his loyal warriors. The giants were not mere mercenaries used by the Philistines. Their presence on the battlefield revealed something much deeper. They had strategic alliances with certain peoples of the time, such as the Philistines and the Canaanites, who not only accepted them into their ranks, but revered them as deities or superior beings. In many ancient cultures, these colossal figures were worshipped and feared, seen as demigods or descendants of primordial entities. Thus, the conflicts between Israel and these peoples went beyond mere territorial disputes. They were spiritual battles between the chosen people of God and forces of obscure origin, whose roots traced back to pre-flood times. These accounts continue to fascinate scholars and archaeologists who seek evidence of the existence of these giants in ancient history. The scriptures make it clear that the giants not only existed but played a crucial role in the conflicts between kingdoms and the formation of ancient civilizations. In any case, their presence echoes to this day, fueling debates and mysteries about a forgotten era when extraordinary beings walked the earth. Now, I invite you to follow one of the most impactful moments in David's journey, an episode often overlooked, but that highlights not only the weight of the battles he fought, but also the legacy of the giants who continued to threaten Israel. In the book of 2 Samuel 21:15-2, we find the account of a dangerous confrontation involving one of Goliath's descendants. After years of reign and numerous wars, David, now elderly, led another battle against the Philistines. However, this time, something different happened. The king felt the weight of age and war pressing down on him. At the height of the combat, an imposing warrior named Ishbi-Benob appeared on the battlefield. He was no ordinary soldier. He belonged to the lineage of the Rephaim, the same as Goliath. With a bronze spear weighing about 13 pounds and wielding a newly forged sword, he saw his chance to avenge his brother and end the life of the king of Israel once and for all. David, exhausted and vulnerable, was at the mercy of death. But it was at this crucial moment that Abishai, son of Zeruiah and David's nephew, intervened. With a precise strike, he brought down Ishbi-Benob, saving the king from a fatal fate. In light of this event, David's soldiers made a solemn vow. They would never allow him to return to the battlefield, for he was the lamp of Israel, and his loss would be irreplaceable. However, the threat of the giants had not yet ended. Soon after, a new war against the Philistines broke out, resulting in the death of another giant, Saph. Then another battle took place at Gob, where Elhanan, the son of Jaare-Oregim, defeated another formidable warrior identified as Goliath the Gittite. But there was one more challenge. In another battle fought at Gath, a warrior of impressive stature, who had 6 fingers on each hand and each foot, challenged Israel. However, he was slain by Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. 2 Samuel 21:22. Thus, we see that the threat of the giants persisted, but one by one they were defeated. The God of Israel continued to show that it was not the strength of the giants that determined the victory, but the faith and courage of those who trusted in him. These events reveal a surprising fact. Goliath was not an exception in his lineage, and his brothers continued to challenge Israel even after his death. The presence of these giants in the biblical accounts suggests that they represented a persistent threat, and their battles with God's people hold mysteries that remain little explored. Few know the full story of these colossi from antiquity, and there is still much to be uncovered about the 5 brothers of Goliath, their connection with the Rephaim, and the true significance of this lineage in ancient times. Who were these giants? Where did they come from? How did they perpetuate through the ages? If you want to understand more about each of them and the enigmas surrounding their origin, stay tuned. I will soon bring a detailed analysis of this almost forgotten lineage and their battles against Israel. I'm sure you'll be amazed. This narrative, practically erased from popular memory, reveals one of the most dramatic moments in David's life. Many are familiar with his epic victory over Goliath, the Philistine giant who challenged the Israelite army and was struck down by a young shepherd armed only with a sling and 5 smooth stones. But few know that years later, as king, David faced another giant, a warrior as formidable as Goliath, determined to avenge the death of his brother. His name was Ishbi-Benob. Like Goliath, he descended from the lineage of the Rephaim, a people of giants whose existence dates back to ancient times and who in some way survived the flood. The Philistines, recognizing the immense strength of these beings, not only recruited them as mercenaries, but also revered them as deities due to their towering stature and superhuman strength. However, Ishbi-Benob was not just a warrior hired by the Philistines. This battle was personal. His desire for revenge against David burned fiercely. He wanted to eliminate the man who dared to challenge his race and stain the honor of the giants with Goliath's death. The confrontation took place amid an intense battle between Israel and the Philistines. David was no longer the fearless young man of his earlier years. Years of combat had left deep marks, and on that day, exhaustion made him vulnerable. The weight of age and battles began to take its toll. The king of Israel, fatigued, found himself in real danger of death. It was at this critical moment that Ishbi-Benob advanced. His weapon was terrifying. A massive spear with a bronze tip weighing about 13 pounds, capable of piercing any armor with ease. Additionally, he wielded a newly forged sword made to destroy any enemy that crossed his path. He was no ordinary adversary. Ishbi-Benob stood at a colossal height, estimated to be between 9 and 11.5 feet, and his presence was so intimidating that even the bravest soldiers quaked before him. David, determined, fought courageously, but fatigue was taking its toll. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, Abishai, son of Zeruiah, intervened. In an act of bravery, he attacked the giant before he could deliver the fatal blow, killing him and saving David from imminent death. This moment marked a great turning point. The soldiers of Israel realized that their king could no longer expose himself directly to danger on the battlefield. In a solemn oath, they declared that they would never allow David to risk his life again, for he was the light of Israel, and his loss would be irreplaceable. Thus, the story of the giants did not end with Goliath. The descendants of this lineage continued to challenge Israel, but the courage and faith of God's people ensured that one by one they were defeated. These often forgotten battles reveal not only the power of the giants, but also the strength of a king who, even in his most fragile moments, inspired his warriors to fight until the end. This battle wasn't the last time the giants crossed Israel's path. Goliath's brothers continued to appear, and other descendants of the Rephaim still challenged the Israelites. But on that day, one of the last great giants met his end, and with him, the certainty that the era of the giants was coming to an end. And so we have unraveled some of the greatest mysteries about the giants of the Bible. Arba, the colossal ancestor, the 5 giant races that challenged kings and prophets, the revenge of Goliath's brother, and the impressive battle of 10,000 giants against just 4 kings. But the big question remains, are these stories just ancient legends or fragments of a truth hidden in time? The Bible leaves us clues, but the secrets of the giants remain shrouded in mystery. What else could be hidden in the pages of history? If you like this content, leave a like, Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. See you on the next journey through the mysteries of the past. See you soon.